We got an area swamped out in here where we can get around a little bit again. Well, I drug the shaper out. I want to mount this power feeder on there. Well, here's the power feeder down here. It's a humongous thing. Well, I've taken the base off of the stand-up portion on it and cleaned it up. Everything was dirty and dusty and of course full of corrosion protective grease. And I got it lined up there on the shaper table. I want to mount that on there. So that means I'm going to have to drill some holes in the shaper table and bolt this down. Feeling around underneath here, I've got a rib right here. So I want this past that rib. I wanted to get it over to this edge as close as I can, but I want it far enough away from this cast rib on the outside that I can get a nut on it. And I've got another cast piece right here, so I want to move that up just a little bit more like that, and so that should do it. Yeah, there's a web right there underneath, almost underneath that one, a little bit more. It should clear that web, and then this one is clear over here on this side. Oh, it wouldn't hurt to go over up just a little bit more. I want to get it back as far away as I can and out as far as I can. Of course, having it up is going to keep it balanced, maybe more weight over the cabinet. So, anyway, that should do it. That gives me room underneath there for this hole here to clear. There's a web going across this way, another web going this way, and this one clears that area there. Yeah, there's a cast block right in here that this table bolts up into, so that clears that. Yeah, everything should clear good there. Alright, so that's where I'm going to put it, just like that. Well, I've got a transfer punch. These holes in here are 1/2 inch. What I want to do is do one hole. I've got a 1/2 inch transfer punch. Do one hole. Drill that and tap it for a bolt, and then I'll bolt this down, and then I'll do the other holes. I found out something yesterday about these drills that I didn't know, and if you tighten this chuck up as tight as you can, you actually set the ratchet here, the torque factor on it, but anyway, tighten that up as tight as you can, and then come back and it'll click just a little bit, and that locks that chuck on the drill bit. And I've had trouble with this drill bit, this drill chuck on this drill, loosening up on the bits before. Tap these so I can just thread those bolts right into there, but I might get long enough bolts to go all the way through to put nuts, a big washer and nut on the other side, so it has more bearing surface on there too. Belt and suspenders. Alright, I got to go figure out what size bit I need for that and the tap and everything. Well, I went up to the basement and checked my charts for a 1/2 inch 20. It's 29/64 drill bit. Now I dug one out. We'll see if it's sharp enough to drill that or not. And of course it wouldn't fit in that drill motor that I had, so I had to dig out my 1/2 inch drive drill motor. And I just checked on this. This is an old, pretty old drill motor. And as far as I can see, the same technique will work on this to lock this chuck in as worked on that newer one. So let's see if I can drill a straight hole here. Not exactly sharp, but it got the job done. and see if I can find a drill bit that may be a little sharper than that one. That one's working, but the half inch or the 29/64s. But let's see if I got a sharper one. Well, I found a fresh 29/64 bit, but I don't have any more half-inch 20 bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and drill this hole out, and then I'm going to have to wait till tomorrow to go to town to get a couple. I'll get some half-inch 20 bolts and nuts and stuff to mount that on there with. And I don't want to drill any more of the holes until I have enough bolts to hold that down locked in place before I set up to drill the other holes. So that bolt just barely goes down through the table, and what I want to do is I want to get long enough bolts to go into the table and through so I can put a nut on the other and a washer on the other side to spread the load out. I need another bolt to hold this down to make sure it's it looks like it's going to be pretty good. It's locked into that hole right there, but I want to make sure and get it bolted down to that hole so these two holes will line up perfectly. Forecast today was for heavy rain, and it did rain hard this morning, and it's raining hard right now. But there was a while there this late morning and early afternoon where the rain quit. I was just getting ready to go out and take advantage of that and put the rest of these battens up on the house when I got a phone call from a friend of mine, and I haven't heard from him in a couple of months, 3 months, something like that. Well, he was a good friend. We traveled the country together for several years back and forth, practically lived together in the business that we were operating at the time. I spent some time talking with him. He was concerned. He knew my son lived down there in Fort Myers, Florida, where the hurricane went through, and he was kind of concerned for him. Well, he called to see how everything went, if he was okay and everything, and to let me know that he had some money in case he needed anything to bail him out, to help the kids out or anything. Well, I let him know everything was okay, and then we talked for a couple hours. So today's Friday. The hurricane went through down there at Fort Myers on Wednesday. My son was in pretty constant contact with us the early part of the day when the hurricane started going through, and then they started losing power and cell service and whatnot, and we got an intermittent report from him through the evening. The last we heard from him Wednesday was when the worst of the storm had gone by and everything was okay. Well, then yesterday, Thursday, we didn't hear from him all day, and of course watching all the news reports and seeing the videos from down there in Fort Myers and stuff, it was kind of concerning. But I knew he was in an area that wasn't close to the coast, the water, where they got all that flooding and stuff, and the worst would have been the wind. But anyway, we didn't hear from him all day yesterday, and he got a hold of us this morning and said everything is okay. They've got power on at their house in their section of the neighborhood. Across the street they don't have power. Internet's still not on. Cell phone service is real spotty. And they came through it. He didn't say they came through unscathed. He said there was minimal damage to his house. There are quite a few trees down in the neighborhood, and he's been out helping the neighbors clean things up and stuff there. So he's staying pretty busy. We asked him how his boss's house fared, because his boss has a house on a canal down close to the water, and then his sister-in-law, brother-in-law and sister-in-law, they lived out towards Sanibel Island on one of the islands out there, close to Sanibel Island anyway, and they'd evacuated their house and went to my son's place and stayed with him, and they haven't heard how their house fared yet, but they can't get around yet. A lot of the streets and stuff are still impassable, and a lot of emergency services crews and stuff like that out, so they don't want to disturb them. So I haven't got a full report of him, how his business turned out or anything like that, but he's safe and sound so far, so that's good news. They went to town and got some bolts to bolt this power feeder down with, and I drilled the other two holes for it, got it bolted down. I don't have those bolts tightened up yet, and I still have nuts and washers to put on the underside here. We'll tighten these down here and then put the nuts and washers on underneath and tighten those down. They're big, fairly large area washers, so they'll help spread the load out on the underside of that table and underside of that bed. And that should make it pretty strong. But so far it's sitting on there pretty good. I just don't want to put too much stress. It's pretty thin, the cast top, and it's got, I put fine threads in there, which is better. It's got more purchase on it than coarse threads would in the thin top. But putting nuts, those big washers and nuts on them was going to be a big help. And then they didn't have regular sized washers. I got to digging through my aircraft bolt supplies, and I had some AN 816 washers, which are a smaller diameter washer, fits right underneath the head of those. So I put those on there. I cleaned this off where it bolts down and put a liberal coating of corrosion inhibitor down there on both. I cleaned this bottom surface cast, I cleaned it up, and of course the tabletop, and I put a liberal coating of this corrosion inhibitor on there, so it's in between the two where they mate together and inside of that cavity in there, so that should protect that pretty good. And then the inside of this casting is coated with it too. I've got this shaft put in, this vertical shaft, and this spins around like this, tightens up here, and it's got a jack screw, brings up and down to adjust the arm, and then this can tighten up here. And then you got a pinion in here and a rack on the shaft that goes through that. What do we do with that shaft now? Oh, here it is over here. Oh, man. So there's a rack on this one that goes through there, and that moves this arm in and out, which moves that head in and out, the power head itself in and out. So you can see this looks kind of crusty here, but I sprayed this down pretty liberal with that SP400 or something similar to that corrosion block before I put it away. So a lot of this discoloration on here is just that. We'll get it polished up here in a minute and get that on there. And then I've got the power head sitting over there. That's going to need a little bit of TLC. It's got some grease zerks on it and transmission in there that takes some oil. So I'll probably change that and clean that up. It's still got a lot of dust and stuff on it from the company that we bought it from. We bought this from a cabinet shop that was going out of business a few years ago. And like everything else, it's just been in storage here for several years now, stuck over in the corner and moved around a little bit. It actually came out of the storage pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So anyway, that's bolted down to the shaper table, and this is getting cleaned up pretty good.